Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have a very, very special guest. I'm here and honored to have Radhanath, correct? Radhanath Swami. And he's talking about this beautiful, beautiful book that I just read called The Journey Within. So welcome.
Thank you, CJ. It truly is an honor and a pleasure to be with you and all of your listeners and
Oh,
watchers.
thank you for being here. I I wanted to find out about Bhakti-yoga, which I didn't know anything about until reading this book. I do the asanas and I do some of the breathing exercises, I think in what's more traditional yoga that you see in a yoga studio. But I had never found out about Bhakti-yoga, so I was wondering if you could just help expose us. How were you first introduced to Bhakti-yoga?
I wrote a book about it called The Journey Home
Mm-hmm.
when I was a teenager growing up in America during the civil rights movement and the counterculture. Um, I took part in those various activities, trying to find a meaningful and purposeful life
Mm,
where I was seeing so much conflict and greed and what appeared to me to be hypocrisy.
mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to try to make a difference in my own life and in the world. And I came to a conclusion that that real difference needs to be spiritual.
Mm,
So I went on a spiritual quest and I took a summer vacation when I was 19 to Europe. I didn't have any money actually, but one friend paid my way there, and then he got robbed the next day.
oh
And
no.
I, and I started hitchhiking to Europe, through Europe, and more I was obsessed with my spiritual search, and I was going to parks and riverbanks, forests, cathedrals, synagogues, monasteries, and I was going to art museums to try to
Mm,
find spiritual meaning in those masterpieces.
mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I was living in a Greek island, Crete, in a cave on top of a mountain. And there I was just crying for direction and
Mm,
praying and meditating and studying various spiritual books because I really believed that the essence of all great religions brings people together on a spiritual platform. I saw so much hate and hypocrisy and prejudice
mm-hmm.
in the name of a loving God
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who's the father of every living being. And I really felt that in order to be honest spiritually, I needed to find that essence. And
Mm,
when I found that essence, I could really have a path to follow.
mm,
And I was looking for it in all these great religions, and I was really finding it. But I didn't really know where I fit in.
mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it was in that mountaintop in Crete that I felt and heard a calling to go to India.
Mm,
So alone, I hitchhiked from Greece through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and entered India. I went to
wow.
the, I went to the Himalayas and studied various forms of yoga and Hinduism and Buddhism from various spiritual teachers. Some were very famous and some were completely unknown. And I was living in the jungles of the Himalayan mountains, and it was a very peaceful life. And I started to travel in other parts of India after some time. And eventually I came to a place called Vrindavan, which is a
Brindaban.
very,
Okay.
yes, it's a very ancient holy place for those who are devoted to Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna means the all-attractive one.
Mm-hmm.
Krishna is the name of the one God for all living beings, for all religions. God has many names. And the name Krishna is very special because it focuses on the sweetness and the beauty and the loving nature of God. Mm-hmm. So in that place of Vrindavan, which was a beautiful forest, and there's about 5,000 temples and ashrams there. Some have been there for many, many centuries. And some parts of Vrindavan, pilgrims come by the millions, and other parts are just very, very lonely, quiet, secluded places. And I was living in those secluded places. And it was there on the bank of the river Yamuna, among those people, that my heart really felt at home. Mm. And it is the path of bhakti that is followed there. And bhakti is really what I've come to find the essential true theistic spiritual paths. Bhakti is what Jesus said in the Bible, to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. Bhakti teaches that love for the Supreme is within the heart of every living being. Within our heart is our true self. In Sanskrit, the self is called the jivatma, or the soul. And that soul is eternal. It is beyond birth and beyond death. It's full of knowledge and wisdom, and it's ananda. It's full of this body is like a vehicle in which the soul is temporarily living. Just like we're seeing through our eyes, we're hearing through our ears, we're tasting through our tongue, we're thinking through our brain, we're loving through our heart. But who are we? The body always changes, and the mind is always changing. But we, the true self, remain the same. We're the witness. And somehow or other, we have forgot that I'm in the body. And we're thinking, I am the body. And therefore, we're very vulnerable to the situations that the body goes through. But the body is a very sacred instrument to be used by the true self. And the nature of the true self, as we have said, is without birth or death. It's forever, eternal. And the purpose of life really is to reconnect with our own true self. Everyone is looking for pleasure. Everyone is looking for love, because the only pleasure that can really touch the heart is love. Things could give some satisfaction to the mind and the senses, but only love can give satisfaction to the heart. And real fulfillment is a state of the heart. In the scriptures of so many various spiritual paths, we learn that the origin of that truth is in the soul's love for God, and in the soul's feeling the infinite love of God. That's our nature, and that nature simply needs to be awakened. It's awakened by living a life of seva, living a life where whatever we're doing, whether we're mothers or fathers or students or lawyers or engineers or doctors or politicians or business, or whether we're monks, we live our life in such a way that we're in harmony with the love of God that is within us. And we're expressing that love of God. We're not working out of greed or envy or arrogance. When we disconnect from that love, then we're vulnerable toward those tendencies.
And when you refer to God, is it a white bearded guy in the sky, or what is God? How do you define God in Bhakti-yoga?
Bhakti-yoga is based on many different teachings. Bhagavad-gita is one of the great scriptures of India. And there, There's a beautiful verse, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham, where Krishna, the speaker of the Gita, tells that throughout history, again and again, the one God, or the one supreme source of everything, who is the supreme father, mother, friend of every living being, has appeared within this world with different forms and with different names in different places, and may speak different languages, but is always according to the time and the place and the people of that avatar or incarnation. The Lord is bringing us back to our true nature, to reconnect to our own souls, to reconnect to that divine love, and to learn to find the greatest fulfillment in that divine love, and to find even a greater fulfillment in sharing that divine love with others.
So what does, let's say that you said Bhakti Yoga could be used as a politician or a student or, in any aspect of your life. So if you were a politician, because I know that you've spoken in front of Parliament and you met with a bunch of politicians, how would you, or we can pick anything, politicians, business person, student, how does one live Bhakti Yoga in a day in, day out practice and still live in the material world?
That's a beautiful question, CJ.
I'm getting to wonder why you're laughing at my questions. Are they absurd questions?
No, I just laugh. That's the way.
Okay.
Sorry. Please don't take it personally.
Okay, I won't.
But the Bhakti tradition teaches three principles that are really important. One is satsang, to, as much as possible, be in the company of people who really inspire us, enliven us, people who are really positive and really spiritually centered, because we're influenced by that. And it helps us to focus on what's really important and meaningful in our own lives. And in that company, we become inspired to have a spiritual practice, whatever it may be. It may be meditation, it may be prayer, it may be chanting God's names, but a spiritual practice wherein we tune into the frequency of the grace and the love that's within us. It's there. Not only is it within us, it's everywhere. But unless we're tuned into the right frequency, we get so many other experiences of life. If we tune into the frequency of greed, there's a lot of it to influence us. If we tune into the frequency of selfishness, everybody's emitting it, so it's in the atmosphere. We connect to that. But chanting God's names, mantras, meditation is meant to tune us into the frequency of the grace, the love, the peace, the compassion that's within us. And when we do that, then whatever our particular activities may be, whether we're entertainers or swamis, or whether we're accountants or teachers or politicians, when we actually find that goodness, that character within our hearts, then our particular occupation, our particular status in a society is a beautiful, sacred means by which we can serve God in the world and others in a beautiful way.
Okay, so let's say that I'm in Parliament and I have someone who's voting against my bill, or I'm at work and I'm having conflict with another person. So I'm around people who don't necessarily carry love in their heart. I mean, what do I do? I'm like, Hari, Hari, Krishna, Krishna. Like, do I sing to them? Do I chant to them? How do I get to? Because one of the practices that you mentioned in your book, The Journey Within, is that you have, you pray to God, you chant, you do something during that moment when you want to remember and recall your divine nature. So, boom, you have right in front of you a person who is conflictual. They are arguing with you. They want to argue with you, and everything inside of you wants to argue back. But there's a part of you that remembers your divine self, and you want to respond with love and kindness regardless of what's coming at you. How does one navigate that situation?
In school, you have tests. But for most of us, we have to prepare for the test to pass the test. Mm-hmm. We don't just come in off the street and take the test.
Right.
And similarly in sports, teams practice for months and months before the actual game. Mm-hmm. Olympic athletes, they don't just, watch television for 6 months and then go to the Olympics. They're training themselves, right. They're practicing themselves. Right. So similarly, life is full of tests. It's the nature of this world. Sometimes it's a very sunny, nice day, and sometimes it's a very stormy day. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those storms go on for a whole season.
Right.
But we know the sun will come.
Yeah.
So when these storms come, it's important that we're prepared. And that's what satsang, keeping spiritual company, and that's what our spiritual practice is meant to do. It's meant to prepare us, where we're feeling, we're experiencing, not just feeling, we're getting a realization of an inner contentment, an inner peace, an inner compassion. And compassion is not just a lazy theoretical idea that we feel for people. Karuna is the Sanskrit word for compassion. It means very intelligent, very dynamic, very thoughtful, very proactive. Compassion is, if we really care, it activates our mind and our life to do these important spiritual works. So, if this is an explanation in many different scriptures, actually, if we build our house on a solid rock, then it's going to hold our house however many storms may come and go. But if we build our house on shifting sand, then when the storm comes, the house will collapse. So our integrity, our peace, our compassion, it's based very much on the inner foundation that we have. And then when we're face to face with an antagonistic person, whether it's at home or whether it's at work, right, or whether it's in the House of Parliament, according to the question you asked, then we're holding our own ground. We're not affected. We're not being affected so much by their negativity because we're surcharged with positivity. We're surcharged with grace. We're surcharged with inner fulfillment. And then we can actually deal with their negativity in a way that we're not affected, and our positivity has that much more strength to influence them.
The reason why I ask is
by our example, and by how we choose to respond to difficult situations.
Over the last, I'd say 15 years, I've been working part-time, but mostly being a householder, being with my family and raising my kids and developing my spiritual practices with my children and myself. And just recently I've been working in the real world, where I'm going with a job where people pay me and I'm, going into the office. And it's interesting that you bring up the idea of a foundation, because even though I've actually built these spiritual practices over a long period of time, I see myself slipping into all those behaviors that I had before doing these spiritual practices. The only difference is that I'm noticing that I'm slipping back into the habits. But it's very hard to see yourself. You're, I guess what they call in the learning models, I'm consciously incompetent. I can see that the foundation that I built is there, but that I'm slipping into old behaviors and patterns. And so I'm sure something like this happened to you too, where when you were first learning bhakti yoga, it was something where, you're slowly building, just like you were talking about the analogy of a sports practice or any type of practice that you do. You slowly build, but you're not perfect, right? And maybe you'll never be perfect, but you're slowly building that foundation. So what to do between when, you're consciously incompetent. I know the skills, I've been building them. I'm now setting out into the real world and trying to apply these skills, and I'm noticing I'm consciously incompetent. and these, so the foundation I thought was pretty strong, but when put to extreme duress, not that strong. So what did you do when you reached those points?
Those points come for everyone. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
But those challenges can really be opportunities. Mm-hmm. If we just look for the opportunity. Because when we understand how inadequate we are, then we could either give up, or we can become depressed, or we could try to hide the fact to others and ourselves that I do have shortcomings. But none of those things have a positive result. Mm-hmm. But in the path of bhakti, we learn when those situations come, that's a beautiful time where we realize that we really need the help of a higher power. Mm. And we humble ourselves to that higher power. Mm. And we pray to that higher power. And our meditation becomes much more focused, in our chanting of God's names becomes filled with feeling and humility.
Okay, so when you said that, I'm imagining my head, for me, I don't necessarily pray, but I go into a deep meditation, and sometimes I say, I surrender these conditions of my mind. Please take these from me, or please fill me with the love of your light. I don't know what you say, but those are the types of things I was imagining when you were saying that. What do you do in your prayers and meditations when you have that moment where you need fortification from the love of God?
You said it very nice. Surrender. Surrender, like a little baby that's in a crisis and really can't help itself, his or herself. She cries for her mother. And when the baby cries for a mother in danger, she's not just doing it to get attention. She really needs the mother. When there's hunger, we can digest food really well. In the Ayurvedic science and many natural sciences of health, hunger is very important. When we have a good appetite, we have the power to digest food and assimilate the minerals and the vitamins and the beneficial qualities of that food. But if we have very, very poor digestion and we don't have proper hunger, then we can't really be so healthy. So spiritually, in order to assimilate our spiritual practice, there needs to be a type of hunger. There needs to be a type of, I need this. It's not just something I do just to feel a little more peaceful.
Right.
My life needs the grace of the Supreme. My life needs that inner connection with the Divine. And these types of difficulties in life help us to take everything much more seriously and assimilate the benefits of our spiritual practices because we have a hunger.
It's funny because as you're saying this, I can actually feel myself welling up with emotion. Like I feel like crying, and I have no idea why I feel like crying. But there's a part of me when you're talking about, like, I definitely have the hunger. I mean, I want so badly to be filled with love and to overcome and to surrender, to just surrender. But it's so hard. It is so hard. I see, and I think it's every day. I feel like I'm whining, but every day I try. And there are things that come up, and it's you just see yourself facing challenge after challenge, and it's hard. I'm not getting depressed about it, but it's hard. Like it's not. It's funny because it's a spiritual practice isn't easy. It's not just about praying, and I mean, you have to really. I think the thing that you're talking about is the hardest thing to do, to just surrender and say, grace, please be within me and guide me. Hard to do.
In one sense, it's the easiest thing to do.
Okay, tell me when you get to that part. Okay, tell me about your own journey towards surrender, because I'm crying here. Okay, tell me, how do you get from my desperate crying and hunger to the point where you get to say it's easy? Tell me about your journey from where maybe my starting place, which is like many, many moons from where you are now. How did you get there?
I'll speak about the principle first.
Okay.
When I say it's the easiest thing, because it's natural. Mm-hmm. It's the nature of the soul. It's the nature of the true self within the heart to be surrendered to the Supreme. Just like isn't it natural for a baby to surrender to the need of the mother? It doesn't take, when a baby's in a dangerous situation, it doesn't have to go through all kinds of a crisis to surrender to the mother. She just naturally cries for the mother in complete attention, only thinking, only my mother can help me, right? It's natural and it's easy. But because we're so much habituated and conditioned to trying to find our solutions in so many other things, we've just kind of lost we've lost that propensity to do what's actually most simple and most natural.
Yes,
But by practice, we once again come back to that natural state.
But what happens when you surrender and grace brings you all these confusing things that you have no idea? I mean, to surrender means to truly walk in the unknown and be okay with the unknown and say yes to what God brings forth. I know you have free will, but as I understand, the premise is that grace is, you have grace set upon you. You have opportunities and magic that's surrounding you every day, and you say yes to those things. And sometimes when you say yes to all those things, it seems like one big confusing mess. But I'm still saying yes, but it feels like a confusing mess. And I don't understand it. And there's a part of me that has supreme faith that it will all make sense at one point. But it's hard to get there.
If we have teachers that really give us, proper guidance and good guidance, and by their examples as well as by their words and by their guidance, then it's not surrendering to the unknown.
Okay.
We actually know. We can, by hearing from the proper sources and by developing some faith, we actually know. It's a deeper truth than what we see with our eyes or touch with our hands. That the Supreme Being or God or the Divine is there for us within our hearts and everywhere. And when we have that faith, not a sectarian faith, but a true faith. I know one lady, I'll give an example, and she was in her last stages of dying of cancer. She was a very active lady. She had many children. She was always protecting the rights of people who were being neglected or abused. She was a very empowered person, very devoted. She was a devotee of Krishna. And she, in her last days, she was paralyzed from her waist down. Her husband and children had to clean her excrement.
Oh, wow.
They had to feed her with a spoon and then through tubes. And she was emaciated. And one day, just before she passed from the world, she said to her husband that compared to what I used to be, my body's irrelevant. And then she smiled with a beautiful twinkle in her eyes. She said, but I have limitless relevance because Krishna loves me. And I feel that love. And she said, but I can't think myself better than anyone because God loves everyone. That love is there. And when we're with people and read literatures that help us to understand the nature of that love, then it's not the unknown. It's actually the greatest reality that we're trying to reconnect with. And then even in difficult times, surrender comes naturally as we start as we become more tuned into our true nature. And if it's not coming naturally, then we just need to practice.
So if our true nature is our godlike self, right? As you said, each of us has our own unique expression of God within us, and then surrounding us is also just a supreme being or Krishna or whatever you want to call it. But if we surrender and we listen to our inner voice, our inner God, and how about if that takes you to strange places that you don't understand?
That's in our tradition, we have three principles: Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Guru means our teachers who are enlightened, or teachers who have made good progress toward enlightenment. Sadhu means the whole history of traditions of the great saints, the great spiritual teachers, how they lived, what they taught, what they wrote. And Shastra means, these holy books that actually give us a roadmap to where we want to reach.
So I think your answer was read spiritual texts from gurus, or sign up with a guru. I don't even know how you find a guru, but you basically follow people who will guide you along, which is what this whole book is about, right? The journey within. It's a guide for someone who wants to find the path. I assume the path of love, which is what's pretty much in your heart, which is the essence of you. So when you were reaching those points yourself where you weren't sure if you were hearing the voice of your ego or the voice of Krishna or your divine self, then did you read a book? Is that how you found your voice, or did you talk to a guru? Like, how did you know? How did you begin to develop an inner sense of knowing?
It's important that we're sincere We're sincere to humble ourselves to what is beyond our abilities. And it says in the Bible, seek and ye shall find.
Mm.
If we have that sincerity to know God, to love God, to really learn to see how all living beings are our brothers and sisters, and how to live with compassion to all, how to find that compassion within our own hearts. If we're really seeking that and we're sincere, then a power beyond our own will guide us to the right people in the right places that can actually, help us on that path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're saying, so if you're not sure if you're hearing your higher self or your ego, to just sincerely ask, please, I need help, and help will arrive. Something will be sent my way. Is that what you meant?
If you want to learn to be a doctor, then you go to medical school. Mm-hmm. There may be many medical schools, but you find the one that suits you.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
If you want to learn how to play the piano, you go to a piano teacher. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the AA or Alcoholics Anonymous, people who have been struggling with addictions, they've found a community of people who really help them to overcome those weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So it's natural. If we have a sincerity, then we'll want something real. Mm-hmm. We won't want to join a club that builds my ego to think I'm better than everyone else or we're better than everyone else. But in good company, in saintly or enlightened company, we learn the value of humility and gratitude and perseverance. Mm-hmm.
And the humility that you're referring to, because you refer to it in this book several times, and I'm Chinese, so there's humility is a very big value that has been taught, ingrained in me from a really long time. But the humility that I'm understanding you're saying, because you were talking about the humility of going, please, I am a baby. Please help me. It's the humility of realizing that I don't know. I'm not sure what to do. I have these habits. Please help me. It's the humility and humbleness to say, I just don't know. Is that what you mean by humility?
Humility is a very deep subject. That could be a preliminary state. Mm-hmm. Because if we think we know everything, we won't sincerely seek out any better knowledge.
Okay, got it.
So when we admit to ourselves that the more I learn, the more I understand I don't know, and we really become seekers. We really become seekers of truth, that hunger we were talking about. And then through the experiences of life, through our interactions with other people, through our learning from enlightened people or texts, it goes deep into us. It transforms us because we're hungry. We have sincere will. Mm-hmm. If a person wants to be, back to the example of a doctor, you can't just very half-heartedly say, I kind of want to be a doctor. If you want to be a surgeon, you have to really, really want it. And you have to find the right teachers and find the right courses, and you really have to go into it sincerely. Mm-hmm. So in a similar way, humility helps us to understand that my heart needs to be open to receive the grace of the wisdom and knowledge of others. And it has to be humble enough to actually connect to the wisdom and grace of God that's within us. Mm-hmm. And then humility also is when we, with courage, with incredible amount of perseverance and determination, we accomplish things, but we don't become arrogant by it. We don't become condescending when we're more successful than another, and we don't become depressed when someone else is more successful than us. Rather, we understand that I'm trying my best, but ultimately, it's the sincerity of my effort to please God, to be an instrument of compassion, to live in harmony with my spiritual principles. That is the real success. It's not the result.
That was huge. That was huge for me. Okay, that's huge. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
And in humility, we find great joy in seeing other people succeed. And we find great joy in giving credit for what we do to all the help we've received from others. And that type of humility liberates us, it frees us from all the mental blockages and challenges that are constantly distracting us.
Okay, that was huge. I get an E for effort, for sure. I get an E for effort. And from what I'm hearing you say is just continue seeking, continue looking, which is, I feel like many people describe me as a seeker. I don't know if I've found a couple things that resonate with me, but not necessarily one particular religion or one path even. Which it's almost multiple paths, almost like when you were describing your own journey, where you were going to Europe and you're listening to music and you're going to cathedrals and you're going but something at the very end when you're in Crete in that cave called to you to go to India. Nothing has necessarily called me yet, but we'll see where that goes. I'm still seeking. Maybe I'll seek for the rest of my life. I don't know.
What we're seeking is within us. What we're seeking is who we are. We're seeking the love that is our nature, and we're seeking that love of God that is our greatest joy. It's that love is within us.
Yeah.
That peace is within us. That happiness is within us. So there's a story of a musk deer. It's looking everywhere for incredible fragrance of musk. It's looking through the whole forest and spends its whole life searching for this fragrance, but never understands that fragrance is an extraction, not an extraction, but it's excreting from one of his own clans within himself. So we're looking for pleasure in so many things in so many places, but it's actually within us. That's the pleasure we're really seeking. And when we find that we have something so beautiful to share. In our tradition, by chanting God's names, by trying to live in a mood of service to God and service to others, and by having a humble, prayerful mood when we approach God. And it awakens that inner nature within us.
Okay, I have a favor to ask you to close out. You have in one of your chapters, you have Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which is how I'm reading it. But I'm sure there's. Can I ask you a favor, just to close us out? Can I hear you chanting that? What it sounds like when you're chanting that? Like a little nighttime. Can you chant for me? I want to hear what it sounds like.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show. I know you're going all over the States. You said that you're traveling for the next 6 months all over the world. How does one find more information on where you're traveling? Do you have a website?
There is a website, but you probably know what the address is.
I'll put it on. I'm going to put it on the screen so people can see it. So go onto your website and it will have all the listings of where you're going to be, including Seattle coming up in September. I understand.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Really, it's an honor. Thank you so much.
CJ, it's really an honor and really a pleasure to spend this precious time with you and all of your wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much.